All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to Frank Analysis. I'm your host, Franco. I'm back from suspension, and I'm joined by Alexandra here. We're going to talk about Build Back Better. She's going to break some brains, and she's going to tell you guys what people like Bernie and AOC are not going to tell you what's in the bill, because they're out here telling people that they're going to tell them what's in the bill, but they're not actually going to do that. Ali here has been reading the how many pages? Like thousands
I
of
don't
pages,
even
hundreds of
know.
pages.
A lot of pages, yeah, a lot of pages. I don't
But
even know
yeah,
which is what.
how's it going, Ali? Great to
Good,
have you
good.
on.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Sorry I'm not on camera today. It's kind of weird. I'm used to being on camera on these shows, but I'll do it Jack style. So yeah, it's good to be here. How are
Jackson
you? Yeah,
style.
Jackson style. Yeah. So yeah, I've
Uh,
got a lot to cover today. So
yeah. So for the
be
people who don't
interesting.
know, I have talked about the Build Back Better agenda with our friend Paulie, aka Shadowban Refugee.
Yes.
He went through some slideshows. He's also read the bill, and we're gonna go even further with Ali to talk about Build Back Better because there's a lot to talk about in that bill. There's more to discuss than within that 2 hours of stream that I did with Shadowban. But first, I just want to give a shout out to Ali's article over here, writing
Ah,
about
thanks.
WTF is Build Back Better, Part 1. So there's going to be a Part 2 coming out soon. So you want to tell us a little bit about this article?
Yeah, so really for me, I remembered seeing Build Back Better years ago. I would look
Yeah.
through just for fun, which I know this doesn't sound like a good time. I would look through like a lot of UN documents and I'd seen it before. So for me, kind of to understand the big picture of something, I've got to go back to the start. And so it kind of took me down this rabbit hole of where Build Back Better kind of came from, what it came out of, and of course, it is related to none other than Bill Clinton. So during the Bill Clinton era, well, post Bill Clinton era, when he was working with the United Nations in terms of tsunami recovery, that is kind of how this all started. So it's essentially the whole program. It's basically a disaster recovery program. But like as you can see, really Build Back Better is just like it's fixing all the problems that have been broken, usually by the same people that broke the whole thing in the first place. So it's the framework for how to codify all of the ways that we'll get to that better place that Biden's been babbling about for months. It's really kind of the marketing campaign for Agenda 2030. And I know that sounds super conspiratorial, but really all you have to do is like look
It's
at the.
not at this point.
It's really not. I would hope not at this point. Yeah. So it's Build Back Better is just one of, I believe it's three pieces of legislation that all kind of goes into the Build Back Better agenda. So you have the agenda and then you have the actual act. And so that act is going to supplement the other bill, which is the infrastructure bill, which I feel like you've heard a lot more about. But this, we don't really know a ton about what's actually in the Build Back Better Act. And it's kind of for a reason. So, yeah, I just wanted to go back and see kind of where this came from. And I'll talk about this a little more as I go through some of the slides that I have. But yeah, it's kind of like just codifying into law what's already been practiced around the world, what's already been done in many places and funded in many places. It's just codifying it into law and kind of setting us up for the 21st century America. You hear Joe Biden talk about it, saying that it's, making sure we're not left behind and making sure we're not leaving people behind and so on and so forth. But it's really the emphasis of kind of framing our society to be ready for stakeholder capitalism, which you've talked about on the show before.
Yeah.
Whitney Webb's written about it extensively. Alice McDowell has done great work about it. Sebs has also done great work, kind of about all of these things that encompass what is within the Build Back Better Act and then the Build Back Better agenda. I think I'm going to get sick of saying Build Back Better over and over again.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's
Yeah.
annoying to say.
Yeah.
But you made a point here about how they're excited, they look forward to disasters, and
Yes.
that's because and leftists who have read the shock doctrine by Naomi Klein should know this. They take advantage of disasters to implement more capitalism, more privatization. This shouldn't be any surprise to people.
Mm-hmm.
But the Great Reset, Agenda 2030, how they're trying to achieve this through the fourth industrial revolution, like this is happening right now in real time,
Mm-hmm.
and this is it becoming reality via legislation, right?
Yes, that's exactly correct. So it's almost like I want to talk about, I will talk about the legislation itself, but what I really want to emphasize here is that the legislators, the people that are supposed to be writing this legislation, they're not. And I know you've talked about this before, but I really, really, really want to hit that home today. Like, going after one or two politicians, or this theater. I know that there's a lot of talk of like Mansion and Cinema being the ones like holding this all up. And then you've got progressives like AOC really gunning for all of this legislation to pass. It's ironic. She actually just did a town hall like 2 hours ago on this. So I was listening to some of what she was saying, because I know a lot of your viewers, have in the past liked AOC. But the point is, none of them are writing this legislation. Like, you'd have to be crazy to think that these people come up with, write bills, like 2,000, 3,000 page bills, go through it and make sure it's all good to go. That's just not happening. It's corporations, it's those attorneys, it's nonprofits, it's NGOs, it's all of these different policy groups that are feeding into pretty much these machines. At this point, it is like a machine, just the way that legislation is churned out, because they know most people aren't going to read it. And it even just going through it, it's not like it's not an easy read. And there's tons of lines that just say like, change this line in this other bill, et cetera, et cetera. So they make it very hard to follow. But the point is that they're not writing it. So they're just the front men for all of these companies. That's all they are. So it's like, I just really hate to see so many people still kind of get emotional and upset about, their favorite politician, when it's like, that's, at this point, it's kind of irrelevant. I know it sounds crazy, but that's not really like the focus, as much as like I want to talk about. But it doesn't mean that you can't, moving forward, ask politicians, if you want to tweet at politicians, ask them about specific things that are more pertinent to kind of this like Agenda 2030 issue, because I would be very surprised to see if any of them actually, could talk about it at length. They'll just talk about this in terms of, well, it's going to provide healthcare, it's going to provide affordable housing, it's going to provide this, that, and the other. And it's just, at this point, the jig is up. So yeah.
I guarantee you and Jack Sith and Seb Solomon and Polly, aka Shadowban, know more about what's in this bill than politicians like AOC and Bernie, who are just given orders to support this, and they're told what to say to people to get them on board. That's just how it is. Like, they're puppets for the people that are calling the shots for this country, which are lobbyists that people didn't vote for. So you want to go ahead and get started and telling us like what you found in this bill.
Yeah, let me share my screen and I will kind of go through some of the things I've found. And I'll talk a little bit more about, let's see here. I will talk a little bit more about kind of like how, again, the beginning started. And I don't know if I can get it to full screen, but we'll deal with that. So yeah, the bill. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. The Build Back Better Act. So there we go. It's HR 5376 and then some. And the reason I say and then some is because it's like seriously, it's just like a mixture of like a million different bills into one. They're really tricky about how they kind of do this in that sense. So let's see here. Okay, and you'll have to not mind my little picture of Bill and Hillary at the top. I had it set up differently. I had it like set up in those as little icons, but then of course at the last minute it wasn't working. So yeah, like I was saying before, WTF is Build Back Better. So where'd it come from? It originated from the UN as a disaster recovery program, and it was kind of perfected by Bill Clinton while he was serving as the Secretary General Special Envoy for Tsunami Recovery. So this was back in 2006. And it's, like I said, it's a disaster recovery model that brings together stakeholders, NGOs, nonprofits, and financial institutions. And like I was saying before, it codifies the processes necessary to be able to implement this fully. And so it's just, think of it as like a constant disaster recovery model. So now we are codifying this into law. So that's just going to be the constant approach, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And just let me know if you have questions along the way. Okay. So I actually I cheated. I took an excerpt out of my article, which you already kind of showed. But like, I really want to hit this point home. It's the whole structure of the system. That's what we're seeing is like the entire shift of, like everything you've heard from Klaus Schwab and the Fourth Industrial Revolution, the Great Reset, all of these different think tanks, the United Nations. It's all kind of coming together for this. It's essentially this financial shift. That's what we're seeing ahead. That's why you're kind of seeing a lot of implemented regulations on like the crypto market. And Sebs has written about this extensively. I would urge you to go read all about that over there at Gnomes for Truth, just because her understanding of all of this is far better than mine. But they're essentially setting up the framework for this 21st century digital economy. And with that is, of course, coming a lot of disruptions in business, in every way we can think. And even just the way that business is done. We say that we're a globalized economy now, but with all of this is like setting it up to be like something you've never really seen before. There are lots of implications for just everyday Americans in terms of, the level playing field. They're trying to liken this as if it's like some kind of gift to the American people, but it's actually, in my opinion, going to set Americans back in a really, really big way. And you always hear Joe Biden talking about this. I mean, he's been talking about it since before he was elected. And that was what was concerning to me, because like I said, I was like, I've seen this before, years ago in these UN documents, and nobody for the longest time like wanted to believe that Agenda 2030 is a real thing, but it definitely is. And so actually what I have here, a lot of you have seen this before. Again, the usuals, Alison McDowell, Whitney Webb, Corey Morningstar have all talked about kind of the sustainable development goals for the United Nations. And so what Agenda 2030 is a culmination of all of these goals being implemented in different countries. So Build Back Better is essentially the United States version of implementing this. Now, you have seen in other countries, they've been saying Build Back Better. Like I know you played that video where there's all these different world leaders saying that. Yeah. So what that really signals is they've signed on to this. Now you can think what you want about, with Trump as far as like how he got elected and whether he was, like a psyop as well. But my one stipulation with that is that he was some kind of wrench in this kind of Agenda 2030 plan. My speculation is that it had something to do with the currency and how they're kind of going to be changing the global reserve currency. That's just a speculation though, just FYI. But what I'm saying is they had every intention of starting this back in 2016. Hillary was obviously the girl for that.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's just what I think. I'm not saying that Trump was like against all this, because do not get me wrong, Operation Warp Speed was an acceleration program that really brought a lot of this in. So I'm not saying that he was, like against all of this. That's not in my opinion the case at all. I think it was like purely financial, and that's just a speculation. But what I'm saying is Hillary was really, of course, think about it, because how this kind of disaster recovery model started, the Clinton era or the post-Clinton era, when he was, doing all the good works around the world. It's just the same people were kind of getting set up to start it then. So then they had to adjust it a little bit. And just really, go ahead.
I was going to say maybe by her second term, which would have been now, is what they were when they were planning to roll this out. But with Trump, I think some of the narratives that they were going to use, like sustainability, like all these progressive things, because the country was like mainstream. People were, the illusion of heading left was where we were heading with Obama. So maybe that's what they were trying to use to roll this out.
Yes.
It's just my guess though.
No, I can see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Obama was a great catalyst for this, because it's, again, I really want to emphasize, and just again, like with even just these 17 different goals, like it's not just one person, one or two people. As much as we focus on those people, it's really the structure of how this is all operating. I know that, kind of sounds fake too, but what I mean is like, look at what their tentacles are going everywhere. With these goals of no poverty, zero hunger, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of what you see here, you will find replicated throughout all of this legislation that is coming up. There's keywords or key phrases, as we know a lot of them, or climate action. Again, I'm not saying forget that, but things like gender equality, just like these very basic phrases that nobody ever really stops to ask, like, what does that mean? Like, what does that look like? Because we know from these people, when they tell us one thing, it usually doesn't mean that exactly, for us at least. And so I brought up then another aspect of Agenda 2030 Just as an example, I highlighted at the same time, national development efforts need to be supported by enabling international economic environment, including coherent and mutually supporting world trade, monetary and financial systems, and strengthened and enhanced global economic governance. So there's that lovely word of governance, which is essentially tying together governments, NGOs, and financial institutions to kind of, at this point, invest in everything possible, including us. We are, we are assets in this huge investment that you keep hearing Joe Biden say, we're investing in Americans. But it's like, what's the return on that investment and who's getting the return on that investment? Because I don't believe that it's anything to do with you and I. Just let me know if you have any questions along the way. So yeah, what does Joe say? Joe, of course, I've seriously listened to like probably 15 different speeches of his now, trying to sell this Build Back Better Act. And at this point, I could tell you the stories that he's been telling about his father, because he says like the same 5 stories over and over again. But yeah, like the same 5 stories. But yeah, he says simply, this will create jobs. My question naturally is, what kind of jobs? We're going to fund the science. And I do want to emphasize the science because a friend, Jesse, he's in a lot of the discords. He actually pointed this out.
Oh, he's here.
Oh, right on. Hi, Jesse.
Yeah.
He made this distinction. I was, talking about this once kind of, and we were talking about science and applying science. So the science is almost at this point like a religion. Whereas, the science is in like an application, it's an ongoing process. So obviously based on what we've seen, the science is the prevailing, type of science we're using here. And again, Biden says invest in Americans. And then we see a lot of this language about taxing the rich. That's also not what it seems. I know a lot of people made a big controversy over AOC's dress, which that whole thing was, not great. But there was a reason she did wear that. And taxing the rich, it's not going to hurt them. They're simply restructuring how all this is going to go. So I would say, if anything, that's actually going to just make the wealthy even wealthier. It doesn't mean that we're going to see any of, those taxes that are going to be increased on people making, I believe it's over 400,000. I could be off with that number, but it's just, again, like not falling for these silly kind of catchphrases that people just fall for time and time and time again. And so, yeah, there's Joe's quote, and it's again, like the fair return for the work they put in and an equal chance to get ahead. He's so full of shit. That's all.
So again, with the tax the rich, like that's an illusion of victory that they're gonna do. And then with the fund the science, it's interesting. Would you say that the science, like the institutions that we now have, is a new church? What they used to use to control people with their narratives, now they're using science. Oh, trust the science, and then people don't even look at their own research. Now there's all these headlines coming out. It's like how critical thinking could be dangerous now for you. All these mainstream headlines treating science like a religion. This is like what we have to accept, right? So what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I mean, for a while now, I've been like, okay, that's a little sketchy, because you've probably seen those signs. I don't know, maybe you haven't. You're in the area you're in. I'm sure people had them up in their yards saying like, love is love, trust the science.
Oh,
like
yeah.
I saw, yeah. So when
fully
I started
vaccinated
seeing those,
in front of their houses too.
Yes.
But yeah, they do that. Like, like in this house, we tolerate blah blah blah. Like, we accept you if you're like LGBTQ or whatever. But then it's like we believe the science.
Yes, and it's like wonderful. Okay, great. And I'm sure most of those people mean well, and they're trying to, because in their frame of mind, what they're consuming as far as news, they're thinking of this is like, why aren't people just following the science? So I get it in the sense that like they mean well, but at some point you kind of have to get over the feel good stuff and look at the hard facts. And the hard facts and the science to me are not the same. So what's scary about it is that typically we, are taught science isn't something that's like it's not like a humanities type of course. You know what I mean? Like it's like numbers and like equations and all of that, which has always been something kind of concrete for people. So especially for like very logical minded people, for them to kind of like shift how they see science now, I think that's going to be tricky to get people to like realize that the science is not actually the application of science. Or if it is, it might be, funded by actors that are looking to do very specific things in terms of research and, merging technology with that. So it's all kind of all kinds of creepy stuff. So yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. So yeah, why do we not know what's in this? So sorry, the text is a little bit small, but like I was saying before, elected officials don't write this legislation. Corporations and their attorneys do, among many other people. If we knew, then I think people would really be able to see this for what it is, which is, like I said, restructuring everything to fit the 21st century economy. And again, it's not to say like, it sounds great, but given everything we know and given the origins of Build Back Better and how it's simply a disaster recovery model where people that are running it take advantage of opportunities that present themselves, you can kind of guess how this is going to go. And like I said, yeah, people would realize nothing in Washington is ever what it seems. And I'm hoping that more and more people are really seeing that for what it is. But, you always got to keep trying, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So a few parts that I wanted to talk about in the Build Back Better Act were health innovation, housing, and money, because obviously these are all things that are important to people. And you're going to be hearing a lot of politicians, I'm sure you already are, squabbling about these things in terms of like what it's going to provide. So the first section, and I have citations for all of this if people actually want to go look at, the pages to see the text. But some of the things I found were billions of dollars to genomic sequencing surveillance programs. So that is kind of plays into a lot of this technology we've seen come out of like the biotech industry. So they're very, very focused on wanting to collect as much of this as possible to kind of understand different traits that are evident in people. Like I just saw an article the other day that was talking about an excess of different kinds of traits in people that are, it was a schizophrenic, I believe. And so to me, and as you saw in the article that Sebs and I wrote a month or two ago about kind of healthcare in general and like where it's going, we saw a lot of this like biotech stuff and how it's kind of come from people that they're kind of a eugenicist in a way. So when I'm seeing billions of dollars going into something like this, and I'm seeing articles coming out of all of these institutions, it's a bit concerning because you're not hearing. I've yet to hear any politician tell me about billions of dollars going to something like funding this. Like why? Like there's lots of articles showing like why this is such an urgent thing. We need to keep collecting. So it kind of makes you wonder what's going on there. And I won't go too much farther into that because I don't want to. I know you're coming off of a suspension, so because YouTube sucks.
So
Go ahead.
you want to remind people like when here they're talking about promoting healthcare equity outcomes, aka outcomes for investments. This ties in to what you and Sebs wrote about and discussed here on this show about a value-based healthcare system, right? Or
Yes.
does it not?
No, that's exactly correct. It does. Because again, all of this is really kind of an impact investment model in a sense. So you determine an outcome of success. Well, first you define the problem, and it's usually these groups. They define the problem and they define the measure of or the metric of success. And then they also have kind of a monopoly on who is facilitating whatever program is going to hit that measure or that metric of success. And so it's really a win-win for all the people involved, except for, people, I would say, within that system, because it's still about making money. So if they can get certain outcomes, like let's say, I have an investor, I'm the government, and I have a private financial institution investing to pay for this program that's going to be facilitated by an NGO or a nonprofit. If all the investor is interested in it, because if all they have to do is meet this really simple metric, like reducing mortality and birth rate, just a very vague statement. If they can meet that, they not only they don't lose money, they make money. And the government, it's nothing extra on the government itself for paying things. So you're kind of like offsetting costs by determining the outcome. So there's tons and tons and tons of sections about this, and just billions of dollars going to it. And then that kind of also goes in with this aspect of social determinants of health. So let's say, for example, I'm kind of seeing this actually being rolled out in Chicago. So yes, defund the police. Okay. But what's replacing that? So you have a lot of these like mental health professionals that are going to be going to these different sites where they have mental health calls. And again, I'm not saying that this is a bad idea, in theory, but again, you got to like see who's actually rolling this out. So you have these like kind of like community social workers going to different sites, and then eventually, with all of our investment in AI and that technology to deal with population health, let's say a person's just having like a freak out or whatever it is, if they meet certain metrics and who knows like what the qualifications are, you might be like, hey, so you're going to come with us, we're going to get you into this program. And it's like all of these creepy things that maybe at first sounded good, but if we're not paying attention to how it's being rolled out and who's kind of controlling this, I am very concerned about kind of people's ability to choose really what's best for them. You don't want to put all that power in the hands of these groups when they're still kind of seeking a profit, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead.
We have to judge what their priorities are.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Is our safety and our health a priority, or are they trying to make money? Is that primarily what they're trying to do?
I would say they're mostly trying to make money because, again,
right.
Stakeholder capitalism doesn't mean that you really have a stake in this. It's just not only one entity, it's multiple entities. And yeah, I mean, again, I know it's hard to like think that something could be this nefarious. And I even think that a lot of this like did start maybe with good intentions, but it's gotten out of hand at this point. So, and if Joe Biden's not running the show at all, I really want to hit that home. Yeah. So the next, let's see. So another area that was interest to me is about housing. So you'll hear a lot of people talk about this is going to provide housing for the unhoused. So a lot of what is already done in terms of like vacant properties, especially in inner cities, they let areas get so bad and so run down that eventually the property values are going to keep plummeting, and other people living in the area are going to have to be moved eventually. That again, I'm sure this happens in every major city. Definitely happens in Chicago. I always say Chicago is kind of a microcosm for how things are being played out in the rest of the country. And actually, Obama said that before too. So, yeah, I know. That's like one thing I agree on with him. Yeah. So really, just a lot of what this is like a lot of flowery language that's essentially saying we're going to realign with locally determined properties and goals. So you see that kind of language in that original Bill Clinton era type of building back better language. What that really means is like you have these larger entities coming in and telling local governments what they're going to do. It's not really, hey, what's best for your community? It's more like, this is how we're going to roll out what you're going to do with this area, and that area. There's tons of zoning restrictions and zoning additions that they're going to continue implementing, which is going to displace a lot of people. You're hearing a lot of language about like climate migration and displacement and such. And I also expect that to be a large component of what this is. But really, again, it's like people think that they own their homes in a sense, in some states, I think it's more secure than others. But with something like this, they can come in and, say this land is used for almost anything, and you're going to have to be like relocated in a sense. So I was talking, what did I do? Oh, with healthcare equity and outcomes. It just, you again see with housing, it's the same thing, like tons of language about outcomes. And what I worry about is all this public housing that they want to implement. What is going to be like the qualifier for people to actually to be able to like live there? What are they going to have to do? What are they going to, like have to prove to the government, et cetera? And it's like, if people think it's bad now, I fear that will just be worse, because all of this will be tied to kind of like your new social credit score that's, pretty much around the corner with, and, we've been talking about like digital IDs and all of that. So it's all really going to be tied together. And again, if you have questions, just stop me. I know I'm kind of going all over the place here, but it's that digital aspect of like, what can you qualify for, even housing? Are you, getting all the right healthcare? Are you doing all the right things in terms of like your money? And it's just like, I worry that tying it to something like housing is actually just going to screw over a lot of people that really need that help.
Yeah, this all makes sense. Like all of it so far, the pattern that we're seeing is like with housing, with healthcare, all of it is value
Mm-hmm.
based.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the
Yeah,
interest is in uh, the people benefiting, right? It's not in that. It's in making a profit for these people at the top.
exactly. And so tax the rich and more. So there's another aspect to this, which is raising the corporate tax. I believe it's to 26%. And that's, I mean, what that essentially says to me is that they're going to try to just sell it like, well, we're taxing corporations now. We're, entire, they should pay their fair share. You constantly hear Joe Biden talking about lecturing everybody. You need to pay their fair share. He says it the same way all the time. I hate it. And he's been saying this. He was saying this back in 2014, 20. He was talking about how all of these changes will benefit the middle class. Yet he had talking about how the middle class. Which one is it? I'm planning this on with his friends. So he says what tax does well is the wealthy do extremely well, and he's still saying that to this day. So it's like,
1 second, Ella. Could you repeat the
oh yeah, go ahead.
last 1 minute of what you said? Because you sounded you were cutting off in and
Oh
out.
no, oops, sorry about that.
It's all right.
Oh no. So I was just saying that, what was I saying? Just taxing the rich, like I was saying before. It's not actually what it seems. So this like 26% global tax, I believe that they will be implementing on corporations around the world. That doesn't necessarily change like how corporations are operating already, but what it does signal is that they're going to be doing something with that money. It's not like that money is going to be coming back to just people like you and I. There's another aspect to this, which is hiring more IRS workers. Now, I was just listening to AOC talk about this like on a panel she had today about the Build Back Better Act. She was saying that the IRS, they're going to be going after all these rich people who have been able to evade paying taxes. Now, I don't think that's the case. I don't think the government is hiring more IRS workers to go after the rich. They're going to be monitoring more and more of our bank accounts, as we know, well, with that $600 limit, I believe that they want to implement in terms of monitoring spending. People might push back and say, well, they can already look at your spending. But with this, tying it with everything else I've been talking about, did you buy something that you shouldn't have bought? Did you know what I mean? Like it's all going to kind of be tracked. So like I said, digitization of all things financial, because the end goal is no cash. They want to be able to track literally every purchase. The cash is going to be a thing of the past, which is, I know it's nothing new to your audience, but that's something that a lot of the language that I read within this bill is all pointing towards that. But I just found it funny that AOC was saying that the IRS workers were being hired specifically
To go
to go
after the
after.
rich?
Yeah, like to help with that taxing the rich scheme. It's like, no, that's not what's happening. They were talking about was one of the recent reports, I believe, that came from Facebook. I've been out of the loop the last month, but I know there was like a scandal from Facebook talking about all these corporations that were investing money like in the Cayman Islands. And AOC and the other gentleman she was with were saying, well, see, the thing is with American companies, they're so rich and powerful that they don't even have to, put their like hide their money offshore. And I'm just like, what are you talking about? Like they're basically saying that, up until now, we haven't been able to track them and, like lay down the law. But now with this and with the IRS, hiring more people, that, that's suddenly going to fix the problem. And I want to add in, there's been a lot of, they're going to go after like really hard all the people with like PPP loans. That's a huge thing. There's tons of schemes that, people got screwed over, but they're coming after everybody. And that's why the IRS is hiring more people. And also that goes along with just like the digitization of everything. They're going to need people to kind of like help implement this shift. So yeah, I mean, this, a lot of this is stuff that like you and your audience already know. It's just kind of reframing it for you to understand that yes, the legislation matters in a sense of like what that means in the future, but to think that the legislation being, like passed is the start of something, I don't want people to walk away thinking that legislation being passed and, going through is just kind of like the cherry on top. It's all of these programs have already been tested out. They've been funded through different private organizations or academia, different think tanks, and tested, and then it will come up for legislation. So I don't like how politicians will always pretend like this is something that, has never happened before. It's like, no, you are just there to kind of sign, seal, and deliver it to your masters, which are not the American people.
And
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and that ties in with what we were discussing with Jack Sith, like the digitization of everything, having no cash. Like you can't, like everything has to be tracked. Like the government wants to track everything that we do, and so we can't opt out. We can't try to like hide away from anybody. There's no privacy.
No.
I think that moving away from cash and moving to a more digital system, I think that it could be done if we didn't have the current ruling class that we do.
Correct.
And if we had a more conscious ruling class, or if we had a more decentralized society. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
No, I completely agree because, I mean, there's tons of people that see the crypto space as like a way for counter economics. And I'm sorry to say, I don't agree. It's not counter economic. It's a different system, and that's fine. Like it is what it is. But now it's important to realize the powers that be have completely, taken that, or, some people think that it was like always supposed to be this way. It was like a great way to get us onto this digital system. But, I don't want people to think it's completely hopeless, or like if you do use, crypto or whatever right now, like you're a horrible person. No, it's not that. It's just like, here's a heads up. I mean, there are some really bad things that are coming along with it. Like obviously a lot of what Sebs has talked about in terms of like how they've tested a lot of like digital, like blockchain technology on like children in Africa, which you never hear anybody talk about. It's just these other like ethical implications. And that's kind of another thing I want to talk about really quick is just the idea of like, just because we can doesn't mean we should. And it's like, this bill to me kind of symbolizes all of these different groups of people like trying out so many different experiments and like pushing the limit so far that it's like we don't even really have a handle on it. And I don't know if all the people within the system like understand it, because people are so siloed off into their own like respective like industries. Like, do you know what I mean? Like they're not talking across the board with each other. So I feel like that's a big part of why we're not super behind. I mean, some people are, but why it is hard for people to kind of understand how this isn't just one group or one person. It's a whole structure of the system, and it's going to take real work on behalf of all of us. And I don't have the solution. I gave, here's a few, but because I know you're a solutions-based guy. And that's the thing is like the first solution to me is kind of just getting people to face the music like entirely. It doesn't mean it's all like just bleak and we're screwed, but if we live, keep pretending to ourselves that like the old way is gonna, we're gonna go back to quote normal, or things are gonna, calm down. I don't see that happening because of the disaster recovery model that is kind of being rolled out here, or just, reinvented, if you will.
Yeah. That just shows like all these like all these solutions here that people are trying to like people looking for crypto as a way out of the system. Like we're not going to solve anything like that until we get to the root of it. And right now the root of it is that we don't have control.
Correct. We don't. I mean, I'm going to reference Sebs. She just did an article about, somebody like Gary Gensler, he's the chairman of the SEC, the Securities Exchange Council, and just everything that they're doing with crypto itself. It's like, you have to look at this and kind of ask yourselves like, okay, why are they doing this? When that man has one of the largest holdings of Bitcoin in the world, for example. It's like, why is he wanting to, emphasizing so much regulation on something that he knows very well because he used to teach courses about all of this at MIT. It's just things like that that kind of signal to people like, hey, maybe we should pay attention, because I think a lot of the crypto community, they have very loud voices and they've got a large reach. But so many of them don't tell you that they got in early. So of course they're excited
Mm-hmm.
about it. You know what I mean? And I know Jack talked about this extensively
Yeah.
as well. It's just like, it doesn't, I mean, I personally am not, I don't like any crypto. I've always asked them like, why did we think this was a good idea? But I do get it. I understand that it is a way to make, I've always seen it as like a way to make money quickly. So if you got in and got some money, hell yeah.
Mm.
But if you think it's a long-term, some kind of like freedom option, I'm gonna disagree with people, because
Yeah.
everything we're seeing is being kind of implemented through this digital revolution. And yeah, it's again, it's just facing the music in terms of like, where are we really at, and starting from there. So a solution I have is like, it's cliche to say, well, local, but in terms of like how it relates to the Build Back Better Act and the Infrastructure Act and so forth. See what your like city and county are doing with federal dollars in terms of projects. So Shadow Band actually found a section in one of the other bills where they're talking about like closing off railroad crossings. Now that's kind of a side note, but what I mean is that they're redoing all of like our highways systems and et cetera, et cetera. Um, and so just like look around and see what projects are being implemented, because
Mm-hmm.
if you can kind of follow the money with that, like how he pointed out all these railroad crossings are being closed, which is really weird. We have like some crazy theories about that, but I don't want to share those today because they're really scary. But basically, my point is like, look around and just see like how it's manifesting itself in real time. Just like in your city, there's a wealth of information there, and if you can kind of start there, it's I think a little more manageable and less daunting to kind of like understand how this is all happening. And I really beg people to ignore the theatrics of Washington. I understand that
Mm-hmm.
it's entertaining, but
Yeah, it's their reality TV for a lot of
mhm.
people, and they don't realize it.
Yes, exactly. Like, it's eventually, it's like for your own mental health. It's like, how is it like that healthy to keep getting angry about what AOC said? Like, come on,
Yeah,
it's
what we should
not.
focus on is the system of it,
Yes, yes,
as opposed to the personalities.
yes, yeah. And I mean, I've been guilty of that, myself. But eventually, you kind of realize, like, well, think how hard it is to change ourselves, let alone other people, especially people that
Yeah,
don't work for us. So, like, why would they be changing for us? But I think it's actually more manageable to change, starting small, but structures of an entire system. And of course, like, do your own research. I would, I've listed some people and just kind of look at the text itself. I know I didn't actually show much of it today, but I'm happy to share it with you. I've got, just like this PDF of various sections that I'm going to include in my part 2 of that article. So I'll share that with everybody, just so you can kind of see, like, in their words, what they're saying.
okay.
And yeah, just like look around, like at work, just see how, like, notice things that are changing, maybe that you wouldn't normally notice. And kind of once you start to learn like the language of the Great Reset, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, et cetera, and all those keywords, those buzzwords I was showing you from like the Sustainable Development Goals, you really start to pick up on things, and kind of, if you're like work for a small business, like, are they getting pressured to kind of upgrade their technology systems in terms of being on board with something like the Internet of Things? If you're working at a larger company, how are you seeing as far as like offices, like how are they like combining, are they going fully global? So there's just all kinds of things that you can look out for in your day-to-day life, and then start asking questions, because we're not going to get anywhere if we're just sitting around talking about only Klaus Schwab, because it's one man. But if we can see how the system that people like him have designed and how it's
Yeah,
playing out, I think it's going to be tough, but you can't go down without a fight. And so that's kind of how I feel about everything in
yeah,
terms of this. So yeah.
yeah. The personalities are like a. It's probably it could serve as a gateway to introduce people to how the system works by exposing them and what their plans are, what their goals are, and how it's a part of this whole system, this
Mm-hmm.
whole process that they're trying to do to benefit themselves and to show people, okay, are they really in it because they want to help you? Do they really mean well, or are they in it only mostly for themselves?
Yeah,
What is the thing that they are a part of here? Right? Like when we talk
exactly.
about Klaus Schwab or we talk about certain politicians with their own goals, they all have their own goals,
Mm-hmm.
right? Politicians mainly want to just make money off of their campaigning
Yeah.
and have security
Yeah.
with their jobs, and so they're going to do everything that they can and listen to orders from the current establishment that's in place.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and after they're done, they'll likely go work for a think tank. It's that revolving door system of advising and implementing. And then, of course, they might go into teaching, and it's just that revolving door. And again, like many of them probably started off with good intentions, but once you get in, you realize, well, I would say from the very start, because of who pays for your campaign and who's donating to you, that's who they're going to be listening to because they pay the bills. I'll never forget this old video I found of Joe Biden where he was talking about very early on in his career about how you have to go prostitute yourself
Yeah,
to different people. Yeah, he just flat out
yeah,
says
yeah.
it. Gotta
I
love it.
remember.
Yeah.
Wait, it
So,
was like the 80s or something. He
yeah.
just like went up. He was like, "Yeah, I prostituted
Oh,
myself and blah
yeah.
blah." I told everybody. It was
Yeah.
with the credit card companies, I think.
Yes, I believe
He was a
so.
credit card guy,
Oh,
which
yeah.
makes sense because he's from Delaware.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Hmm.
Delaware Joe. So he's here, and he is a fan favorite of the globally minded business people that are really kind of running the show here because it's that kind of vision that I think was born out of, I mean, this whole thing has been at play for decades, but there's that kind of worldview of like the Clinton era where we know what's best, like we've just got to implement democracy. And it's not to say it wasn't around before them, but just for me growing up, that's like what I imagine is the Clinton era of like the neoliberal world order, like Chatham House, the Council on Foreign Relations, uh, all those different groups. And it's just like they've been around forever. So
Yeah. The
yeah,
DLC, which I
exactly.
think, or is it there's the DNC and then there's the DLC, the Democratic Leadership. I forgot what the C
Wow.
stand for.
Mm-hmm.
Remember?
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
but yeah, Hillary
Right.
was a part of it. Bill Clinton's a part of it. I believe Joe Biden was a part of it. I can't
Mm-hmm.
remember who else. But it's that whole establishment within the Democratic Party
Yeah. And
that they have their chosen people who will run as president, etc.
yes. Yeah. And this is not to absolve any Republicans because we already know, like,
They have their own
yeah, they have
clubs and
their
all
own
that.
clubs. Yeah. But really, at the end of the day, they're all friends. Like they really are. They all have to work together. Um, don't buy the nonsense about them arguing. If they're arguing publicly about something, it's likely to do with something that one of their funders doesn't like. It's for show. It's keeping the charade up. Like, and what we've really kind of reached here is the end of, I think, that charade because we're seeing
Yeah.
more and more stuff just like so out in the open. It's like what the hell? So I think they kind of know the jig is up, but at the same time they're trying to quickly shuffle into the new kind of system, whether they know it or not. Because again, I think I talk about this a lot. I don't even think that people realize like their role in this shift to like a completely digital world, everything that's within the Build Back Better Act. So that's why it's like it's important to try to be patient with people. And I know there's
Yeah.
lots of people like to say shit libs out there, but like there's maybe we've all been a shit lib before, or whatever. I mean, there are some terrible people just regardless, but you know what I'm saying. It's like if you can educate people on again more of like the system itself and less focus on the people, I think it's an easier way to kind of get people to understand like not only their role in all of this, but just like the larger picture.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think it's human nature to stay entertained
Oh
with
yeah,
the personalities.
it
And
is.
once you see the theatrics of these politicians, you can't unsee it. And then
Exactly.
you get entertained. It's like, I don't know what it is. Like some people are just confirming their bias after they realize they've been duped by
Mm-hmm.
personalities, and then so they get attracted and clowning on people when they make it obvious that it's all an act. But
Mm-hmm.
then the next step to go after that is to focus on the people behind the curtain, or
Yes.
the system of
Yeah.
how everything behind the curtain works. So how do
Yes.
you think that we can transition people from focusing on the personalities to focusing on what's behind the curtain?
Ooh, that is a good question. Honestly, just repetition. I mean, I would say it really is on us to just start. We have to do that work in terms of like what is covered. So yeah, you can introduce a person, but then even like for example, like Bill Gates is a very popular figure. So I would say in order to kind of transition away from just like the Bill Gates focus is find other like smaller Bill Gateses around the world because there are many.
Mm.
Somebody who like evades a lot of scrutiny is somebody like Michael Bloomberg. And you kind of like start to look at these different foundations and look how like foundations work and go down kind of like it's like trickle down and like find those people, and then once you kind of like list or suggest other people, I think more of a focus will be on kind of the organizations and the structure that it kind of all goes together, if that makes sense. It's so it is kind of like branching out from just like the one or two main people into like, you know, quote smaller guys, even though somebody like Michael Bloomberg is not smaller, but I hope that makes sense. It's
Yeah,
like a focusing on others and then kind of how they play into the system, because I get it with the personalities, like you know, you're never gonna completely get rid of that. I've been guilty of it too, but
yeah,
it just seems like we will be stuck in this loop forever if it's just only on the personalities.
yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you something from your article.
Hmm.
You said it's right in the beginning, and you just brought it up just now about Bloomberg.
Yes.
So you said that Bloomberg is not criticized enough, and I promise you, he's worse than Bill Gates.
Yeah, I think so.
So you wanna you wanna share with us some of the ways that he's worse?
Yeah, so I mean, the reason I see him as worse, and it could have been a little bit of my mood. I think I'm just so sick of seeing Bill Gates' face. But no, I mean, I think he is because he's funding so many different like organizations and like different silos of society. Like Bill Gates is pretty much, you know, I mean, yeah, he branches way out of like technology, like he's into quote the science, but it's still in like his humanitarian bullshit. But Michael Bloomberg is literally all over the place from, you know, his media like conglomerate. I mean, he's got like Bloomberg News, Bloomberg Crypto, Bloomberg everything. There's like, and he's got an entire
There's
media
Bloomberg
organization.
crypto.
Oh
I,
yeah, there's a
I didn't
Bloomberg
know
Crypto
about that.
or something like that. Yeah, I do look at that a lot because I want to see like what that group is kind of, you know, like where they're at. So he's got that, and then of course I'm blanking. He was one of the first people to implement like a social impact investment in the United States at Rikers Island. So he basically profited. It failed actually, but he profited off of trying to reduce the number. I believe it was like of jailed juveniles. So it's just like he's putting his money in so much shit around the globe and getting and making return after return after return. So I think he's worse than Bill Gates only because he doesn't get the scrutiny that like I think a lot of people like him do. Why that is, I don't know. I would say that he probably has. It's for a reason. Like sometimes I think that people like Bill Gates they're important to focus on, but it's like they're almost there as like the distraction from like all
Hmm.
the other people like a Bill Gates. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I would say that like would go for like a George Soros. That's kind of how I see like a Michael Bloomberg in a sense, just kind of funding, making money. He's just all these people, they've got their money in so much shit.
I do think that the people that are more hidden are more dangerous. But yeah, the
Yes.
spotlight is on Bill Gates and everything that he does with his Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where he's
Mm-hmm.
got his hands involved with the World Health Organization. And also
Yes.
there's people like Jeff Bezos, like the focus is on him as well.
Yes, exactly.
Musk, also another, like people who are in the spotlight. Bloomberg's not in the spotlight so much
No, he's not.
until he ran for president. But then, even then, after he was out, people stopped talking about him.
Yeah, he always evades scrutiny. It's like he's I mean, he's got an astronomical amount of money, you know, capital, assets, everything. And he's I mean, he's investing in a lot of city projects, like metropolitan type of planning projects, different housing projects, all over the place. I definitely will follow up more about that though, just because he doesn't get enough scrutiny. And just from him alone, you can go find hundreds of other people. And that's, again, kind of goes back to what I was saying, which is like, it doesn't seem as daunting when you can just start to look like in your own city and see like who's, on this foundation. What are they up to in the city? Thank you. Yes. Bloomberg has all the mayors in his pocket. Yes. And he's restructuring governance to digital from Israel. Yeah, exactly. Like it's kind of unreal how much she's in. Like when I first learned about it, it was she like brought this up to me. I was like, yeah, Michael Bloomberg, that's not somebody, like you said, he ran for president, but otherwise he just kind of was there. And the man is got his hand in all kinds of pots around the world. So he's definitely a huge factor in the idea of everything being digital in his entire organization. So, yeah.
And I remember they changed the rules for this guy when he ran for president. He wasn't supposed to be on the debate stage according to the rules that they had, but...
Oh, I don't remember that. Really?
Yeah. He didn't reach... He got into the race late. He wasn't high enough on the polls yet. Oh wait, no, he was high enough on some polls, but they cherry picked certain polls. But I can't remember what the other requirement was. But the other requirement, they also bend the rules so that he could be on the debate stage. And then they kept people like Mike Gravel and Tulsi Gabbard off of the debate stage, who are at the time more outsider candidates. But I mean, we know
perceived, yeah.
Tulsi, like the perception is around her now. And I wouldn't back her again, considering her recent comments. She should know better, and she shouldn't be warmongering like for us to go to war in Africa. Like she should know a lot better than that.
No, I see her as essentially. I'm kind of upset with myself for not noticing this before about her, but all that she's up to in Africa. I mean, love her or hate her, she's a part of the military, and this isn't a jab at people in the military, but at the same time, I find it interesting that she just got back from Africa, and it's like, well, what were you doing there? And come to find out, there's lots of special operations going on. And again, I will reference, because Seb's just put out an amazing article about this, what's going on in Africa. So she definitely knows what's going on over there. So we shall see with on that one. But yeah, it's disappointing to say the least. But she's involved in a lot of psychological operations. So I will leave it at that.
Yeah. And also considering our election system and all that, like there's no point in backing any candidate with the current election system that we have.
No. If they're not going to tell you really what's up, what's the point? What do you think, they're going to change their mind when they get there? No. It's theatrics. But again, I don't want people to just walk away from this and be like, well, there's no hope. It's just
there's hope. And it starts with informing other people. You have this knowledge now. Share it with other people, but don't get so focused on trying to change their mind right there and then. We don't want you to destroy your relationships with other people like that. It's counterproductive. Just try to plant seeds and be like, hey, here's the perspective, here's some information. Do with it what you will.
Yeah.
And bond with them on things that you do agree with them.
Yeah, and again, like if all else fails, just go to the source, go to the documents themselves. Like sounds crazy, but you have all these people analyzing shit, and I guess I'm analyzing it, but like I said, go ahead and look for yourself. I'm not saying you have to read all 2,000 something pages of it, but I will be writing about more of this in the future, because we're going to see the theatrics completely ramp up again with the passage of this bill. They're pretending like I said, cinema and Manchin are against it, therefore they're preventing us from getting healthcare. Like, it's just...
They just want something worse, or something that their specific donors want. Like, they want the path of least resistance. What they're trying to achieve with this bill is give a surface level perspective of something progressive that we're gonna get.
Progressive. I always have asked. I've asked, what are we progressing towards?
They're progressing, like the people who write the bill are progressing, but we're not.
Right. And
we're just tools for them.
Yeah. And progressing towards a society, like the word progressive, it's again another one of those words. It's like, oh, she's a progressive. Okay. What does that mean? What are we progressing towards? I don't know if I really want to go that way. So it's just like thinking a little more about what these people are actually saying and being real about it instead of pretending like they are gonna just like do something for you tomorrow. It's not how this structure of the system goes. So yeah.
So some shout outs here. Ricky Rance, thank you very much for the super race. Said this is such important work. Thanks, Franco and Ali.
Oh.
And we have Tea Leaf said, right on, Ali. And then they say, changes. Look at the transhumanist signs on the Chicago EL and other subway slash trains shown as advertising. Is there something, have you noticed that?
I haven't been on the L in a while, so I will have to go check that out. I haven't been on the train lately, but I'm sure that there are lots of advertisements with that. You said it was like transhumanist kind of.
That's what Tea Leaf said. Changes. Look at the
Interesting.
transhumanist signs on the Chicago EL. What's the EL?
Oh, it's short for the L, like the elevated tracks. It's just
Oh,
like so it
okay.
goes downtown on the loop. Yeah, it's just like our subway system. I'll have to check that out. I haven't been on there in a minute.
Well, Ali, you want to leave us with any final messages here?
No, I mean it was great to come on. I wish my camera would work next time. It was good to, I've been kind of like hiding away for a month or so, just kind of gathering my thoughts about some things. But it's good to be back, and you can go ahead and follow me on my Medium or Substack. It's alialexandra.substack.com, and I believe the same for Medium. And then I haven't been on Twitter in like a month, but I'll get back on. But you can follow me on Twitter at Ali Alexandra with 2 A's. So yeah, I'm looking forward. I got a couple of projects ahead, doing some work with Sebs and Jack and Shadow Band. Got some fun stuff in the works there. So yeah, it should be all good ahead. Yeah,
and shout out to Gnomes for Truth.
Yeah, Gnomes for Truth.
Yeah, includes Ali, Seb
Yep.
Solomon, Shadowban, Refugee, and Jack Sith. I love having you guys on. It's the most informative interviews and panels that I have when you guys are on.
Well, thanks. Hell yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think we like to just read and kind of like go through the really seemingly boring stuff.
You
It's
guys are
actually more fun.
masochists.
Yeah, I know. I think so too. So yeah.
All right, everybody. Thank you guys so much for watching. And remember, you're not alone. And I know you'll stay informed. Take care.
Bye, guys.